The Lord has established signs between us and him that we are in this covenant with him. And so it's really important that we understand the signs that he has designated, the things that he has said, this is going to be a sign between the two of you, between the two of us, of the covenant we have with one another, of the agreement that we have with one another. Just like there's a sign between a husband and a wife, there are signs that they are committed to each other. They're faithful to each other. They don't go and mess around with other people. They're invested in the relationship. They, try to negotiate and resolve issues between them. They come home to one another. Those are all signs that you are fulfilling that covenant between the two of you. There are also signs that you are fulfilling the covenant between you and God. Let's take a look at those signs. And let's not limit it to just what we're reading, but these are some of the signs that you are in this covenant with God. Exodus 12:13, the blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. Okay, so that is a sign between the people and God that they are obeying God, and it is also a sign now. What's the fulfillment of that sign? Well, you are either sealed by God or marked by the enemy. And that happens within your heart. And so he established something in the physical so that you could understand the spiritual. Do you think it might be important for us to observe Passover in order to understand that sign, in order to understand what God has established? Yeah, we no longer put the blood of the lamb over a doorway, but that blood is over our hearts. And the sign or the representation of what is coming from our heart is going to come out in our deeds, our forehead, our thoughts, and what we speak. Exodus 13, verse 3. Commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand. Eat nothing containing yeast. Today, in the month of Aviv, you are leaving. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, the land he swore to your ancestors to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you are to observe this ceremony in this month. For 7 days, eat bread made without yeast, and on the seventh day, hold a festival to the Lord. Eat unleavened bread during those 7 days. Nothing with yeast in it is to be seen among you, nor shall any yeast be seen anywhere within your borders. On that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that this law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time, year after year. Does that sound like a command that has been abolished? Does that sound like a command that we are no longer to fulfill? Because God is saying, this is to be observed because of what I did for you. So when people are saying, well, this has already been fulfilled, no, you don't have to observe it anymore, they don't know what they're talking about. And if that isn't enough, Jesus said when he came here, I've not come to abolish the law, I've come to fulfill it. And so you're supposed to understand what Jesus came to fulfill. He came to fulfill sacrifice. You're no longer sacrificing an animal or grain or a tenth of what you have. You are the sacrifice. And you are the sacrifice as Christ is living in you, through you. And Christ has fulfilled any sacrifice that was needed in order to justify you, except for the sacrifice that you owe to him. So in him sacrificing, you sacrifice yourself to him. Let's read this again, because I want you to listen carefully to the language that he's using, because people are coming on the channel and they are saying all kinds of baloney, lies. And I told you why in the last video. The reason why is because the Antichrist intends to do away with his appointed times and his laws. And if that's the agenda of the Antichrist in the end times, well, then his laws and his appointed times still stand. And God is acknowledging that by saying that the Antichrist attempts to do away with his appointed times and his laws. So he describes the festival, the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread, and then he says, on that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. I do this because of what God did already. So no one should be saying it's because this has already been fulfilled, so we no longer observe it. No, he's saying you are to do this. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead. That sounds a little like the seal of God, doesn't it? That this law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time year after year. You think God went through all that to make a name for himself, carried them on eagle's wings, made an example so that we could understand our covenant, gave them the law on Pentecost? You think he did all that for us to go, it's already been fulfilled. Never mind. Doesn't matter anymore. It's already been fulfilled. Well, yeah, we should remember it. How are you remembering it if you're not observing it in the way that he said? This is why people don't understand. This is why they don't have wisdom. This is why they succumb to counterfeit Christianity, because they'll celebrate Easter with no question. But when it comes to his appointed times, which are not celebrated according to the world and the flesh, then they're like, oh, no, we don't have to do that. That was for Jews. That's been fulfilled. It's without understanding. He gave them this law after it had already been fulfilled. They weren't saying, well, it's already been fulfilled. Why are you making us do this? He wants you to remember the name he's made for himself. I told you in a few videos past that when I was driving out here, one night, my daughter had called me up and she was really freaking out. And she was saying the baby hasn't moved for over an hour. And the doctors had been telling her this was a high-risk pregnancy. The baby was going to die any minute, all of this other stuff, right? And she had stepped away. God was taking her out. He was pulling her out of medicine and saying, no more, no more. But she was having to work her faith into trusting that God is the one who gives life and that he could make sure that this baby was going to be alive. And there were moments where she was panicked, where she was really freaking out. And that night was one of those moments. And she was crying. She called me up crying and she said, the baby hasn't moved for over an hour. And I said, I'm coming out there and I'm going to pray over your belly. And we did that. And no sooner did all of us put our hands on her belly and start praying, did he start moving more than I've ever felt him move in her belly before. On the way out here, I was crying. I was really just in so much distress. It was so stressful to go through that whole process. And for, in the process of God pulling her and her husband out of medicine and telling him, no, I am enough. I've been in that state for a while now, but he has to do what he's going to do through my children and through each one of you. And I respect that that's your process with him. But having that little crack open for the devil to slither in and start freaking us out was incredibly difficult because I don't give anything. I mean, I don't see any of these people. The door's completely closed. But when it comes to the people around you, then it starts to, it's affecting you in a different way. And I was pleading with him and crying out to him on the way over here. And he started reminding me of this very thing. I'm the one who parted the Red Sea. I'm the one who delivered the Israelites. I made a name for myself. And he started telling me to say it out loud. And I'm in my car and I'm sobbing and I'm, was feeling really desperate. And I was saying it out loud. You're the one who did these things. And I'm listing them off. We have to remember this stuff. It is important that we remember this stuff. It's not like he made a name for himself that he wanted us to just be like, oh, okay, yeah, he did those things. He doesn't want us to keep rending our heart into it and keep memorializing it. Baloney. That's a lie. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Because in the midst of everything that you're living through and all of the messages that you're receiving from the world, you need to be able to stand in that. And you need an opportunity and times that are set apart to remember who he is and what he's done. I need that. And I know what I do in a day, but I need that. And if I wasn't observing his appointed times, I would not really have any kind of wisdom or understanding. It would just be some sort of a story. But I am rending my heart, and so are you. Those of you who are observing these holy days, you know how important it is. If you're truly observing it, you know how important it is to remember who he is and to live into what he has done. And you're going to need that. You're going to need that the last 3.5 years that you're here. And so if you're observing these things, not only is it a sign between the two of you, but he is going to embed that into your heart so that you are able to stand when the Antichrist is saying, forsake the Holy Covenant or die. Exodus 13:16, still talking about the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. And it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead that the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his mighty hand. Don't tell me we're not supposed to observe Passover. When he says it this many times and he makes it that clear, don't tell me we're not supposed to observe Passover. Exodus 31:13, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. Is it a day that's holy? No, it's not a day that's holy. That's what Paul was addressing. It's not the day that is holy. It's what you're doing in that day. It's what you understand about that day, that you're entering into his rest, that he is the one who makes you holy, that you are set apart while everybody else on Saturday and Friday night, the two biggest days of debauchery, right, in the world, while everyone else is doing all that, you are alone with him, entering his rest, circumcising your heart from wanting to be a part of any of it. You are set apart. That's what makes it holy. Is the gold on the temple holy, or does the temple make it holy? Is the sacrifice on the altar holy, the gift on the altar holy, or is it the altar that makes the sacrifice holy? Is it the day that is holy, or is it what you understand about the day, what God is doing in you on the day that makes it holy? That's what Paul meant when he said, don't let anyone judge you about a day being holy. When Jesus was healing people on the Sabbath and he was getting all kinds of flack from the Pharisees, and they were saying, you can't possibly be, from God because you don't observe his Sabbaths. You're, healing people on the Sabbath. And Jesus said, if one of your sheep fell into a ditch, would you not go rescue that sheep? Why are you judging me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Stop judging by external standards. Start judging by internal standards. What Jesus was saying is stop judging me about a day. And he even said in John, my Father is always working. If you are working for the kingdom of heaven, if I am doing these videos and I'm imparting a message that God has built in me on Sabbath, are you going to judge me about that day and say, you're not keeping it holy because you're working? Do you understand? Do you also understand that when God is rebuking people for, their festivals being detestable to him and being a burden on him, and he hates them with all his being, and that all they're doing is indulging themselves and all they're doing is celebrating to themselves? And when he's asked in Zechariah, should I continue to observe these fasts? And he responds to them, oh, were you observing those fasts for me? Is that what you were doing? No, you're observing them to yourself. He is talking about internal standards. What are you doing on Sabbath within your heart? It's not about the day. It's about what you're doing in your heart. Does that mean that you don't observe on the correct day as God has commanded you? No, you observe on the correct day as God has commanded you. But your understanding should be what it is that you're doing in your heart on that day. Another example of this is fasting. I've had many people contact me and tell me, oh, my doctor already has me on a water fast. My doctor already has me on a such and such fast. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. Fasting is about return to God. It's about rending your heart to God and living in what he has called you to live in, returning to him and circumcising and turning from your wicked ways, withholding from your physical flesh and circumcising from your sinful flesh. People can observe a fast as the way the world observes a fast, and then they receive their reward. They'll receive their reward here. Just as God says, you've already received your reward. You go around telling everybody, you go around looking miserable and telling everybody, I'm fasting, look at me. But what does he say? On the day you're fasting, anoint your head with oil, wash your face, and stop doing this so that the whole world can see. Let your Father see what's done in secret, and you'll receive your reward. But if you choose to do things according to the world and according to human traditions and standards, well, then you'll receive your reward from them, and you'll have no reward with the Father. You can observe a fast and never return to God. You can observe Sabbath and not do any work, and yet you have other people working for you, right? There are many people who do that. They have their maids and their nannies working, causing foreigners to desecrate the Sabbath so that they can observe it. It's ridiculous. You think that pleases God? You can withhold from yourself and sit in front of the boob tube all day and never actually enter God's rest, never rend your heart, never circumcise, and therefore you've wasted his Sabbath. You've desecrated his Sabbath. This is also the reason why God talks about all of these different things that people are doing when they're fasting. And he says, is not this fast? I have chosen to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Do you get this? That what he's saying is something's supposed to happen in this fast. You're supposed to be rending your heart. You're not just supposed to be doing things as a list of do this and do that. A rule for this, a rule for that. And somehow something's going to come from the ether as a result of you just not eating or drinking. No, the work that needs to be done is the work that's in your heart. And so if you're returning to him, is he not going to move you to follow his laws and keep his decrees? Is he not going to move you to take care of others according to what he has commanded? Is he not going to break the cords of the yoke and set the oppressed free? Stop judging by external standards and start judging by internal standards. It's not about the day. It's about what is inside the day. What's inside the day? What's inside your heart? That is what Paul is talking about. Paul in no way is saying that this is fulfilled. He's in no way saying that this is not important to continue to observe. But unstable people interpret it that way because they would rather celebrate with the world than celebrate to God. Exodus 31:17, it will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So are we supposed to be remembering this on Sabbath? What the Lord has done, rending our hearts to his sovereignty, all those worries that we're having, the worries that I was having. Oh, Lord, are you going to forsake us? Is my daughter going to be okay? Is the baby going to be okay? Am I not supposed to be rending my heart to who he is, that he is the Lord who made this earth? He is the Lord who created me and my daughter and my grandson. He is the Lord who brings to delivery. He is the Lord who brings to deliverance. He has likened deliverance and salvation and the resurrection to a birth of his church, a rebirth of his church. Perhaps he's building understanding in me right now. Perhaps I need to rend my heart to that. Perhaps I need to enter his rest and his trust, and his peace will be restored to me. Perhaps I need to recognize that my grandson and everything that we were going through while my daughter was pregnant, while we were hearing these things, and while we were each, especially my daughter, especially my son-in-law, but each of us was going through this. Each of us was going through this test in order to trust God, in order to give him everything and submit everything to him during the season of Passover, as we're preparing to enter into Passover. Do you think there might be some significance there? Do you think that as I'm looking at my grandson and I'm remembering that amazing miracle and really bringing myself into remembering it every single day and thanking him for my grandson, do you think that I don't look at him and think about what he gave us in his son? As I'm thinking about how much I love this little boy, what a precious miracle he is, and I'm remembering right now what the Father gave us in his son. Do you think he might have been posturing my heart in order to understand that and enter into Passover in a way that I couldn't bring myself? I couldn't bring myself into that posture unless I had gone through this. God does not give grief willingly, but he gives it in order for us to understand. And I'm going to tell you something, for those of us who are going to be saved, for those of us who are going to enter his rest, we're going to understand what we've been given. How can we possibly appreciate and receive what has been given if we're not brought into that position? He's going to make it happen. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, to remove the censers from the charred remains and scatter the coals some distance away, for the censers are holy, the censers of the men who sinned at the cost of their lives. Hammer the censers into the sheets to overlay the altar, for they were presented before the Lord and have become holy. Let them be a sign to the Israelites." So Eleazar the priest collected the bronze censers brought by those who had been burned to death, and he had them hammered out to overlay the altar, as the Lord directed him through Moses. This was to remind the Israelites that no one except a descendant of Aaron should come to burn incense before the Lord, or he would become like Korah and his followers. Interesting. Okay, so incense in Revelation stands for the prayers of God's holy people. What do you think happens when people on Easter are burning incense as they do in the Catholic Church, swinging around that thing? I don't even know what it is, nor do I care. It's not commanded in the Word. What do you think that happens when those defiled sacrifices, those unacceptable sacrifices, are offering prayers before God? Well, what's he say? He says this was to remind the Israelites that no one except a descendant of Aaron should come to burn incense before the Lord, or he would become like Korah and his followers. You don't just come and offer prayers before the Lord when you're not in the right standing with him. And I know some people who engage superficially in so-called faith are going to think that that's not the right thing for me to say. But I'm telling you right now, there are sacrifices that are unacceptable to God, and he does not listen to their prayers. They draw near to him with their lips, but their hearts are far from him. They lead his flock astray. They chew off the hooves of his sheep. You think he listens to their prayers? You think because the Pope prays something that he listens to what the Pope prays? I don't think so. You pray to the Lord with a pure heart, and he will listen to you. Numbers 17:10, the Lord said to Moses, "Put back Aaron's staff in front of the Ark of the Covenant law to be kept as a sign to the rebellious. This will put an end to their grumbling against me so that they will not die." Why is that a sign to the rebellious? Well, Moses did quite a bit with that staff, didn't he? So he wants you to remember who he is and what he has done through his prophets and his servants. I don't care if it's been fulfilled. These appointed times are memorializing the things that he has done and the name that he's made for himself. That is not the same with animal sacrifice. Animal sacrifice was fulfilled through Christ because those animal sacrifices were never what God desired. They were an example of what was to come. They were an example of the fact that you couldn't be covered with an animal sacrifice. And so people were constantly saying that they were bearing their disgrace and their shame. They knew that they weren't covered. That was fulfilled. And they knew that they weren't covered because they constantly had to sacrifice an animal to cover them. But with Christ, you don't have to keep doing that. You live in your faith. You repent. You acknowledge your wrongs and turn from your wicked ways. That's the fulfillment of that law. It does not mean that he has abolished the law, and he couldn't have said that more clearly. You tell me, what has God fulfilled with regard to his command to observe these holy days, to celebrate these holy days? Nothing. In fact, when he was establishing the holy days, he'd already done certain things, so he had already fulfilled certain things. But the people didn't say, well, why are you having us celebrate this if you've already fulfilled it? They understood that it was in remembrance, that they were to remember who the Lord is and the name that he established for himself. Now, God has established signs between us, but he's also established signs in order for us to understand who he is as a God who rewards for obedience, and also who he is as a God who punishes for disobedience. And by the way, who curses for disobedience. Those of you who are saying that people are casting spells and curses on you, that is not biblical. God is the only one who casts curses on you or sends curses to you. And there's no spells in the Bible. Witches, warlocks, sorcerers, they don't have any power. They only have power in what you give them, in the way that you have submitted your heart to them. So if that's what you believe, then you are submitting your heart. You are handing over power to them, because you have preferred to believe that they have some sort of power apart from a sovereign God. Okay, so let's read from Deuteronomy 28, verse 15. So we've talked about signs between God and his people. Now he's going to talk about signs between him and those who are not his people. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your land and the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. You will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion, and rebuke in everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. So let me ask you something. If this is what he says, if he says, if you obey me, then you're going to live in the land in peace. Your enemies will not rule over you. You will not have diseases. I will not bring on you any of these diseases. If those things are happening, is it because people are victims, or is it because the Lord is bringing those things for disobedience? Listen, it doesn't mean that we can go out and start judging people, but it does mean that we are supposed to discern that. We're supposed to understand what the Lord has said in his word. And because we haven't been standing, I stand up and say something about this. I repeat what the word says, and people tell me I'm being unkind. People tell me that this is a destructive teaching. No, this is exactly what God established in his word. You know, the word that Christians say that they believe in. Now listen to what he says in verse 20. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion, and rebuke in everything you put your hand to. What did he say in verse 19? You will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. Are these witches that are putting these curses? That are sending these spells? No. Nowhere in Scripture does the occult send spells and curses. The Lord does these things, and he does it for disobedience. So if you're afflicted, you don't get to say someone else did this to you. Satan's doing this to you. Evil's doing this to you. God does it. God said he was going to do it, and he's the one who's doing it. And it's not because you're a victim. It is because you have disobeyed the Lord. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land you are entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with wasting disease, with fever and inflammation, with scorching heat and drought, with blight and mildew, which will plague you until you perish. The sky over your head will be bronze, the ground beneath you iron. The Lord will turn the rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you are destroyed. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in 7, and you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. Your carcasses will be food for all the birds and wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt and with tumors, festering sores, and the itch from which you cannot be cured. The Lord will afflict you with madness, blindness, and confusion of mind. Oh, what's madness? Is that mental illness? Is that something that psychology needs to treat, psychiatry needs to treat? Is that something that has come on you that everyone needs to accommodate to? Or is that coming from the Lord? No one should say that this originated from anywhere else but where God said it originated from. I've told you about the things I went through growing up, and I've also told you that the reason I was afflicted is because of my sin. Things I went through growing up were not my fault, but my sin was. Even my sin in ignorance. At midday, you will grope about like a blind person in the dark. You will be unsuccessful in everything you do. Day after day, you will be oppressed and robbed with no one to rescue you. You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but you will not live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not even begin to enjoy its fruit. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, and you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and will not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue them. Your sons and daughters will be given to another nation, and you will wear out your eyes watching for them day after day, powerless to lift a hand. And people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all your days. The sights you see will drive you mad. The Lord will afflict your knees and legs with painful boils that cannot be cured, spreading from the soles of your feet to the top of your head. The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. You will become a thing of horror, a byword and an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little because locusts will devour it. You will plant vineyards and cultivate them, but you will not drink the wine or gather the grapes because worms will eat them. You will have olive trees throughout your country, but you will not use the oil because the olives will drop off. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them because they will go into captivity. Swarms of locusts will take over all your trees and the crops of your land. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, and you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. They will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever. So, when these things happen, are they a sign to you? Should they be a sign that you look at and you say, oh my goodness, the Lord is the one sending these things, and I know why? Should that be a sign when these things start happening? Because, contrary to the world, there's no justice in the world. There's no accountability in the world. When you disobey a covenant, an agreement that you have with God, there are consequences for that. And counterfeit Christians don't seem to understand that. They seem to think that they have this guarantee and they can just, oh, God knows my heart, and they continue on sinning. I literally hear people say that. God knows my heart. Let me tell you something. Your heart isn't good. God is the good in your heart. And if he's not in your heart and you keep sinning, there is no God in you and there is no good in you. When these things start happening in your life, it should be a sign and a wonder. You should know exactly who sent them and why he sent them, because he has told you in his word why he sends them. And if you're unclear about it, let me read a little further. Because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of your prosperity. Therefore, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. Does God hand you over to the spirit you've chosen? Do I say that to you over and over in these videos? He most definitely hands you over to the spirit you've chosen. That is why people will be here for the hour of trial and testing that God is going to bring on the entire earth. Let me tell you something else. He says this will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever. You remember when people like Nehemiah or Daniel were praying and they realized that they'd been sent into captivity And they would say, they would go all the way back. They wouldn't just search their own sins. They would search, what did our ancestors do? When did this start? When did the Lord start doing this? You know why? Because they had understanding that we don't seem to have today. They had understanding, and they believed in the things that God had established. They believed that God was of his word, that the things that he has said, I'm going to do these things if you obey me, and I'm also going to do these things if you disobey me. So they knew that they needed to repent. They needed to acknowledge what their ancestors had done. So yes, this is a sign to your descendants. Your descendants should be looking back, and you should be looking back when you see that there are certain curses in your family, intergenerational curses, that they have come because of the sins of your family. And so as you are examining yourself and you're realizing that you've been handed over to that spirit of idolatry, that you have fear in your heart, that you are compelled to either control or to run, to hide or to overfunction, that food is an issue, that hoarding is an issue, that alcohol is an issue, whatever it is that you're indulging in, whatever it is you're distracting with, all these things that you've been calling diagnoses, they are not diagnoses, they are curses. And if you understand a curse, then you understand that the Lord has sent it for a reason, and it has to do with disobedience, and it has to do with your sin, and you need to trace it back. You need to figure out where it came from. You need to figure out where it came from in you and where it came from in your family in order for that to be broken. A person who is wicked, who turns to righteousness, will live. A person who was originally righteous and turns to wickedness will die. You need to be the one who turns to righteousness. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. You understand the curse that I've been talking about? That curse that's going to go out, that's going to just go into the house of everyone who swears falsely in his name, and it's going to destroy both its timbers and its stones. Do you understand that? I've been talking about it. And that's what's happening right now. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine, or olive oil, nor any calves or herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. All you who are storing up, that's your preparation, that's what's in your heart. You're storing up in your storehouses. When this nation comes against you, you have just stored up for them. Nothing will belong to you. You think you have some sort of guarantee, some sort of lie that you've made your refuge? God will foil all of it, because your preparation is in him, and it is a wicked heart that stores up like the pagans. It is a wicked heart that looks at the Bible and looks at prophecy and says, okay, by the works of my hands, this is what I'm going to do. No, that's not the way that you are to live. You are supposed to return to God, and he is the one who will guide your steps. You're supposed to ask him, Lord, what do you want me to do? Is there any preparation that I should be making right now? And if he doesn't tell you preparation, then you don't do it. You wait for his instruction. You understand that this is the predicament of counterfeit Christianity, that they're always looking at God's word as though it's some sort of roadmap to the work of their hands. That is wickedness, and it will be foiled. And you need to understand that when he says this, that a nation is going to come against you, one that you don't understand their language, and they're going to take everything from you. All that insurance that you've trusted in, there will be nothing left for you. You will have stored all of that up for your enemies who will rule over you. It is time to return to God. A fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. They will devour the young of your livestock, the crops of your land, until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine, or olive oil, nor any calves or your herds or lambs of your flocks, until you are ruined. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. Why is he doing it? Listen again. Until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. He has handed you over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. Until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down, until that lie that you have made your refuge falls down, and the power of God's holy people has been broken, until you finally acknowledge and submit to God who is sovereign over all. Think about Nebuchadnezzar. Think about what he trusted in. He had that whole kingdom. Look at this. Look at everything that I've done. And in No sooner did those words come off his lips was he made to live as a wild animal until he acknowledged that God is sovereign, that God is the one who sets up kings and he is the one who deposes kings. Do you understand that these are examples to us today, that we're supposed to understand the significance of that? Do you think that Nebuchadnezzar, in all his riches and all his glory that God gave him, the way that he set him up, was there anything Nebuchadnezzar could do or store in order to make God's plan not happen, in order to keep it from happening? No, not a single thing he could do. In fact, he was warned by Daniel that that was going to happen. He was warned ahead of time, and he did it anyway. I mean, he could have made plans to try to make that not happen, couldn't he? Let me tell you something. All those who swear falsely in his name don't even know. They don't even know that they're swearing falsely in his name. That is why God has prepared me to go through certain things in front of your face as a witness to you, so that you sit and you say, what would I do if I was in this situation? Am I standing? Do I believe this? Do I believe that God is the one who gives life? Do I believe that Carrie and her family don't need to go to medicine in order for that baby to live? Do I believe that? He's testing your hearts. He's doing this for his glory. And you hear me saying, you need to be functioning in your part in the body. And I don't see people doing it. 2 people who consistently show up. Where are you guys? What do you think you're doing here? Is this about your life? Or is this about the name of Jesus, the cause of Jesus, what he's doing in these living stones in his temple? Because if you don't understand that, you're not going to live into it. And you will be speaking falsely in his name. And he will be bringing you down until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. You got your house, you got your family, you got your friends, you got your congregation. What about the body of Christ? You're out there building your own house, not caring that his temple is in ruins. Where are you? You will be handed over for the destruction of your flesh, that you might be saved on the last day. That's what's coming down the pipe. A curse is going out to all those who swear falsely in his name. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb. You understand what he's saying there? The flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you. Oh no, that would never happen. Well, it's happened before in the Bible. Why wouldn't it happen again? Even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his own brother or the wife he loves or his surviving children, and he will not give to one of them any of the flesh of his children that he is eating. It will be all he has left because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of all your cities. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot, will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter, the afterbirth from her womb and the children she bears. For in her dire need, she intends to eat them secretly because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of your cities. If you do not carefully follow all the words of this law, which are written in this book, and do not revere this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, the Lord will send fearful plagues on you and your descendants, harsh and prolonged disasters and severe and lingering illnesses. He will bring on you all the diseases of Egypt that you dreaded, and they will cling to you. The Lord will also bring on you every kind of sickness and disaster not recorded in this book of the law until you are destroyed. You who were as numerous as the stars in the sky will be left but few in number, because you did not obey the Lord your God. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among the nations from one end of the earth to the other. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes with weary and longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread both day and night, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening, and in the evening you will say, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Does Satan do these things? Does the occult do these things? Or does God do these things? This should be a sign between you and God that when these things start happening, that he has sent this curse. None of you should be contacting me and telling me that the occult has sent a curse on you, that you came in contact with some witch that has powers, but you deny the power of God. The occult has no power. The occult has no plan. Satan has no plan. It is God's plan that is being executed. Do you understand? God is the one with the plan. Satan has schemes in order to upset and foil God's plan, but his plan will be fulfilled, even if he has to bring down those fortified walls that you have trusted in, even if he has to bring you to the point of destruction, make you live as a wild animal soaked with the dew of heaven, eating grass like an ox, in order for you to finally submit, finally concede that he is the Lord. He is sovereign over everything. He is the one who sets up kings, and he is the one who deposes them. Joshua 4, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over to you with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go before the ark of the Lord of your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Does he want us to memorialize and understand the signs? And when we obey, are we bestowed understanding and knowledge? It is ridiculous to think that God has abolished his appointed times in which he set up a name for himself, a reputation and a cause. The Antichrist does not want you to know what he has done, because that was set up as an example to you. And so if you don't understand the things that have been done, if you're not observing, if you are not celebrating what he has told you to celebrate as a memorial in the way that he has told you to do it, except for that which has been fulfilled, which is sacrifice, you will never understand your covenant. You will never understand the examples that he has placed before you, and you will not fulfill the covenant that leads to salvation. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and there they are to this day. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to their side while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over, ready for battle, in front of the Israelites, as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they had stood in awe of Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant law to come up out of the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priests, come up out of the Jordan. And the priests came up out of the river carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. Does God reward obedience? Would this have happened if they hadn't obeyed what the Lord had told them to do in memorial? Or are we only to observe what we're doing going forward? If we don't understand what has happened previously, we don't understand the significance of what it means going forward. You are to observe in memorial. That is God's heart. It's always been God's heart. And not all of those appointed times have been totally fulfilled. There are still things happening in these days that are being fulfilled. And as a matter of fact, you don't receive that atonement Because that's one of the holy days that many people say, oh, that's already been fulfilled. We're not supposed to be observing that. That's a lie. You don't receive that atonement until salvation has happened, until the day of the Lord. And you need to be remembering and observing what has been done for you. And if you don't, you will be cut off from your people. You need to be remembering that. The problem with counterfeit Christianity is they don't feel a need. They think everything's been done for them and that they don't have to do anything to accept or receive what has been done, to understand what has been done. They relish in a promise that they'll never receive. Isaiah 19, verse 19, in that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt and a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. When they cry out to the Lord because of their oppressors, he will send them a savior and a defender, and he will rescue them. So the Lord will make himself known to the Egyptians, and in that day they will acknowledge the Lord. They will worship with sacrifices and grain offerings. They will make vows to the Lord and keep them. The Lord will strike Egypt with a plague. He will strike them and heal them. They will turn to the Lord, and he will respond to their pleas and heal them. Returning to the Lord, rending your heart, worshiping the Lord, these are also signs in your covenant. And he sees those signs, and he will return to you. But if you know the word, you also know that there are times when the Lord says, nope, they're going to bear the full consequences of their sins. I'm going to punish them 7 times over for their sins. I'm going to send this, and I'm going to send that, and I'm going to send that. And he goes on and on about everything he's going to send. And then he says, and then I will take compassion on them. Do not test God. There are a lot of signs written in the word, and I encourage you to go in and plug in a sign into, your Bible app, Bible Gateway, Blue Letter Bible. I don't care what app you use. Plug that phrase in or that term in, a sign, and look up everything he says about a sign so that you can understand the fruit of you actually being in this covenant and the fruit of you not being in it. I've been talking with you about the physical signs that God establishes in the earth or in the tangible, in the physical, in order to help you understand what's going on in the spiritual. And one of the things that consistently is going on in the news that we're seeing is a heart failure epidemic, like literal heart failure epidemic. People are dying. And some people are saying that it's from the jab. Others are saying it's from COVID. What do you say? What do you say it's from? Luke 21, and he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury, and he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast in more than they all. For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God, but she out of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, as for these things which ye behold, the days will come in which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? And he said, take heed that ye shall not be deceived. For many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass. But the end is not by and by. Then he said unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts not to meditate before what ye shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay, nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed by both parents and brethren and kinsfolk and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death, and ye shall be hated by all men for my name's sake. But there shall not an hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. And when ye see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Do you hear that? Men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift your heads, for redemption draweth nigh. And he spake to them in parable, Behold the fig tree and all the trees, when they now shoot forth, ye see and know of your own selves that summer is now nigh at hand. So likewise, ye, when ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. And in the daytime he was teaching in the temple, and at night he went out and abode in the mount that is called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to him in the temple to hear him. The sovereignty of God is essential it is essential that we understand the sovereignty of God, that we understand that he is sovereign. Maybe we don't understand his sovereignty, but we understand that he is sovereign, that we believe in that. Because if we don't believe in that, we're not going to be able to obey. We're going to start questioning. We're going to start setting up the world's expertise alongside what he has commanded, and the world's expertise is what's going to trump out, because what God has commanded is foolishness to the world. You know how many people we had coming and telling us that what we were doing was foolish? In the same breath that they talk about all of the fruit, the malpractice, the murder that happens within the sciences, they're asking if we've gone to doctors. It's like it doesn't even add up in their minds. If you don't stand, if you don't believe in his sovereignty, you will be handed over until you do, until you finally concede that he is God. And you remember what Jesus said when he was crying for Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those I sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Why are they saying that? They've been brought to a certain position, and you don't want to be the one who's looking up at him appearing on the clouds, finally admitting that he's sovereign, because by then it will be too late. You have to live that out now. You have to put your faith where your mouth is. And in order to do that, you have to obey what he has said in his word. You have to return to his spirit. You have to turn from your wicked ways. You have to be moved by his spirit to obey his laws and his commands. And I want you to know that his appointed times are part of his laws and commands. And they are part of his laws and commands that the Antichrist has tried to abolish, has tried to do away with, because they are extremely important. Because in obedience, you are bestowed understanding and wisdom. And you heard what happens to those who are disobedient. I pray that you will take this message very seriously. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.